Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. Well, as probably has been already said, my name is Juan Ramón Rallo and I'm the director of the Instituto of Mariana and I'm also a professor in the OMA Business School, where among other things I teach economic theory with some insights of value investing, and this is precisely the topic I will be speaking today. As we will have 3 lessons, the schedule for the 3 lessons will be today we will see the introduction, how value investing can be merged with good economic theory. This is with Austrian economic theory. Why it makes sense, the whole philosophy of value investing, even from an Austrian perspective, which is an economic perspective, in principle not much related with investment, but you can clearly see why inside the Austrian economic theory there's a definite space for an investment theory based on the principles of value investing. And then tomorrow, in the 2 lessons we'll have 2 extra lessons we'll have tomorrow. The first one of them will be the one in which we will explore how valuations, how consistent and correct valuations about financial assets can be performed using value investment principles, value investing principles. And then in the second lesson, the last lesson, we'll see how macroeconomics, this is the business cycle, has a clear influence also on valuations, and how the investor must be aware not only of the internal problems a company may have, but also of the whole problems the economic system may have. I think the macroeconomic part, which is the 3rd lesson, the last lesson of tomorrow, it's very important because value investors have more or less a definite scheme of how to pick stocks, but they haven't taken the intuitions or the theories of the Austrian school in relation with the business cycle. So there are very few value investors which use business cycle theory in order to pick up stocks. They obviously pick up stocks according to value investing principles, but not in the context of the workings of the economy. I mean, in fact, many value investors are against any kind of macroeconomic analysis, because they say, I am good at picking up stocks, I cannot foresee the future, I cannot foresee what the economy will do, and my only aim is to select the good stock at the good moment. If then we have a crisis, it's not a problem, because when the crisis is overcome, as I have chosen a good stock, in the future it will be realized at a good price. But obviously, if you combine both correct stock picking with selecting the stocks at the proper time, this is with timing along the business cycle, you can have even more spectacular results. In Spain, for instance, we have one private investment fund, which is the most successful investment fund in Spain, which follows both value investing principles and Austrian school theories, and he has achieved for more than 20 years an average return of more than 40% per year. So, I mean, these theories and these principles, which will be explained today and tomorrow, make economic sense, both in theory and in practice, and I encourage you a lot to continue studying these things, because at the end it's your net worth which will be reflecting. So the structure of today's lesson will be the following. As I said, today will be the most theoretical lesson, because what I want to do is an approach to value investing from the principles of Austrian economic theory. This is an conference or a lesson more thought on people who already have some notions of economic theory in order to fill into the gaps of their economic theory the value investing principles. Okay, so which will be the structure? We will start by seeing how subjective valuation leads to the imputation of value among factors of production. Then we'll see how those factors of production are placed all along the economy in the specialization of the division of labor and the division of capital, how capital is the essential tool in order to develop business plans that lead to a coordination between or among economic agents, how that capital, that mental tool, has a cost, an opportunity cost, which is the interest rate, as we will see, how that cost of capital is the baseline of minimum return that must be that a project must have in order to be a good project. But we'll see that you can find in the economy projects that have extraordinary profits. This is returns which are above this baseline, this cost of capital, ordinal cost of capital. And we'll explain that these extraordinary profits are the result of some kind of competitive advantage, which obviously we'll have to explore why this happens. Then once we have the business plan and the business plan with competitive advantages, we'll see how the business plans are usually funded. This is how capital is obtained in order to be invested in the business plan, how financial markets fit the funding of the firm through stocks and bonds, and how you can value those stocks and bonds, how the valuation of stocks and bonds can be problematic or can be performed in a wrong way, and how then appears the value investor in order to correct those failures and to obtain extraordinary returns through that correction. Okay. Value subjectivity is something that starts with Karl Menger, with the principles of economics, and basically what Menger says is that value is a thing of preferences. This is, you have some ends and you have to rank those ends. So those ends that are higher in the rank are more valuable than those that are lower in the ranking. Okay, so valuation is ranking preferences, and the order in the rank, the most important, or the order of importance of the ends depends on your subjective valuation. Okay. And then here we have to put another concept very important, which will come about later when we speak about the cost of capital, which is the concept of opportunity cost. This is the most important end you have to give up in order to fulfill your previous ends. This is when you face a trade-off, the most important end you have to give up, its value, is the opportunity cost. Okay, so those concepts are something you are familiar with, I assume, so it's not, I will not lose much time explaining them. Then, once Menger have explained that value is a ranking of preferences, he then goes into classifying goods by different order. I mean, not all goods are consumer goods. Consumer goods, Menger says, are first order goods. This is the goods that are closest in order to satisfy your final needs. But then you need other goods in order to produce consumer goods. And these other goods are what Menger calls second order goods. And then you need other goods in order to produce second order goods. And these other goods are third order goods. Okay? So you have like a pyramid, inverse pyramid, where you have at the beginning the final end, which is, for instance, a sandwich you need in order to feed yourself. Then in order to produce the sandwich you need second order goods, which can be bread, apple, ham, whatever. Then in order to produce second order goods, you need third order goods. For instance, water, flour, an oven, okay? And then obviously you can go up in the pyramid. In order to produce third order goods, you need fourth order goods, fifth order goods, etc. It's important and relevant to us is that although we usually say that value is subjective, and that's true, utility, this is the value of second order goods, of third order goods, it's not independent of the valuation of the first order goods. I mean, the value of the higher order goods depends on the value of lower order goods. If we go back to the pyramid, the value of the bread depends on the value of the sandwich. If you hate sandwich and you hate anything with bread in it, the bread will be not value at all, okay? Because the utility of the bread depends on the value of the sandwich. And if you love sandwich and you are willing to give up almost everything in order to have a sandwich, of course you will value highly the bread. So although value is subjective, utility is not subjective in the sense that is independent of the value of the final end, okay? Or you cannot say that you can give any value to utility independently of the value of the final end. Utility is subordinated to the value of the final end. And this is important because we will see later that one core concept of value investing is intrinsic value. Austrians and value investors tend to debate a lot if you can speak about intrinsic value, because Austrians correctly say that intrinsic value does not exist, that all value is subjective. That's true, but once you have the value of the consumer good subjectively defined, you already have the value of the higher order goods. I mean, you cannot have one value for the consumer goods and completely independent utilities of the higher order goods. So in a sense, once you have the value of the consumer good, you objectivize the value of the utility of the higher order goods, okay? So, well, as I said, utility is not, the value of the higher order goods is not subjective in the sense that any subject, any economic agent can determine it in an independent way of the value of the ends he's aiming to. Okay. So there's an imputation of utility from the consumer good to the factors of production which are needed in order to produce the consumer good. Then, how those factors of production are placed in the economy? Well, this intuition about how factors of production are organized in the economy in order to satisfy the most important ends of the subject was first, or at least most famously, explained by Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations through the concept of division of labor. What tells division of labor? That people tend to specialize in some specific tasks in order to increase their productivity, their ability to produce, and then exchange with other economic agents the result of their labor. So, division of labor basically tells us that economic agents are specialized producers and generalist consumers. They produce just some small amount of things, but they demand a lot of different things. But what it's more interesting to us it's not so much the concept of division of labor, which obviously is very important and very crucial in economics, but the concept of division of capital. In the economy, it's not only labor which is organized and divided in different tasks, but also capital. Capital is placed in some business plans or in some entrepreneurial projects and in so many others. So you have some organization, some structure of capital. But how we do define capital? And again, we have to go back to Carl Menger in his article on the theory of capital, which basically tells us that capital is the value of the factors of production, this is of higher order goods, which are organized in the market so that to achieve a monetary return. This is what Menger says is capital, is the value of those factors of production that are trying to satisfy other people's needs. Okay? So the problem is not how to value, how to assign utility to the factors of production that are useful for you or to you. It's how you assign value to the factors of production that are creating value for other people. So then you have a division of capital, because you are not using capital for your own pleasure or for your own satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of others. And then of course you have very complex problems, because in a society where everything is interrelated, where every resource, every factor of production can be used in many different ways to satisfy many different ends, you have to achieve a way of classifying which of those ends are more highly valued, more urgent, and then more or should be addressed more urgently. And this is through capital as a monetary concept, not as a value concept, but as a monetary concept. Okay? And this is what Mises said in Socialism, in his book Socialism, that without market prices you cannot have the concept of capital, and without the concept of capital you cannot calculate into the economy. This is, you cannot say which projects are more urgent and more affordable than others. So capital is the prime tool in order to divide capital in society, to assign capital to the most urgent needs, and then to coordinate people all along the economy. But capital is not free. I mean, capital is a factor of production at the end. So capital has a cost which we know every cost is an opportunity cost. Okay, as Menger explained, the relevant cost to us is those ends that are given up in order to fulfill a most important end. Okay, so the intuition that capital has a cost comes from von Baber, the disciple of Menger. In his book, he explains that in the market there seems to exist some regularity which he calls the law of costs. What is the law of costs? That in the long run, average costs tend to be equal to average prices. Basically, that what the revenues of a company are the same that the expenditures. But he says that this is true, but for a spread, for a difference that it is never that never disappears. I mean, average prices tend to be equal to average costs, but for a spread, for a differential. And he asked himself, why it is that that expenditures don't go up to the point where they become equal to revenues? And he explains it because the use of the spending of, or the purchase of factors of production and the investment of capital has an opportunity cost. And that opportunity cost, that cost of capital, is precisely what explains the difference between all the rest of the expenditures and the revenues. I mean, no one is willing to spend 100,000 euros in order to get back 100,000 euros. It would make no sense. But if there weren't any cost of capital, that would be the result we had. People would push the price of factors of production, this is costs, up to the point where they became equal to the price of the consumer goods. But this difference persists always. It never disappears. And it never disappears because we reach some point at which people is not willing to continue investing in order to achieve very, very low returns. Okay? So capital has a cost, and that cost is explained through the spread, through the differential between average prices and average costs, or between revenues and expenditures. And how is determined this cost? Because, I mean, is this cost tiny? Is this cost huge? What are the drivers that move this cost? Von Baberg explains that the main driver of this cost of capital is time preference. This is, do you prefer now 100 euros or do you prefer 100 euros in 10 years' time? Obviously, everyone prefers to have now 100 euros and not to wait 10 years in order to have those same 100 euros. So, present goods, the goods that I currently have, are more highly valued than future goods. Okay. So, if you in order you to postpone your consumption, the fulfilling of your ends, you must be compensated. If I say, how much money should I give you in order you to wait 10 years for earning 100 euros? You would say 150 euros, 110 euros, 140 euros, 200 euros. Every one of us would say some figure. The point is that everyone would say some figure higher than 100 euros. And this difference, this premium, this extra price we want in order to postpone our consumption is precisely the cost of capital according to Von Baberg. Okay? But there's a second driver, which Von Baberg doesn't explain, but which is also very important. And is risk aversion, which is in the writings of Frank Knight. What is risk aversion? If I say you, what do you prefer? 100 euros for sure, or 100 euros if with a probability of 0.1%? All of you would choose 100 euros for sure. And in fact, in order to take the risk of gambling for 100 euros with a 0.1 probability, you would for sure demand more than 100 euros. Okay. It's like playing lottery. You are giving up some sum of money for sure in order to achieve, not with a lot of probabilities, a huge sum in case you win the lottery. Okay, so risk aversion is another component, another driver of the cost of capital. So the higher the time preference, this is the higher I value present consumption against future consumption, the higher will be my cost of capital. The higher compensation I, as a saver, will demand in order to invest. For instance, if you have a high time preference, and I say you, which is the minimum return you ask in order to save and invest 10,000 euros? 10,000 euros. If your time preference is very high, you would say, I won't save 10,000 euros for less than 15% return. Okay. So that 15% return would be your cost of capital, your minimum return in order to save and to invest. On the contrary, if your time preference were very low, you would say, I don't care. Even if you pay me a 2% return, I am willing to save and to invest. Then your cost of capital would be 2%, very low. Okay? And the same happens with risk aversion. If you are a person who don't want to take any risk at all, you will ask for a huge compensation in order to invest in some risky instrument. So your cost of capital will be huge. If you are a brave person that don't care at all for risk, then you won't ask a huge compensation in order to put your savings, your capital, into risk. Okay? So the cost of capital, this is the compensation. It must be paid to the saver in order to keep the capital invested, owing with time preference and with risk aversion. And this cost of capital is more commonly known as the interest rate. Okay? You can see it's not exactly the interest rate because stocks do have a cost of capital and do not have an explicit interest rate, but in order to maybe understand ourselves more clearly, we can call the cost of capital the interest rate. This is the percentage, the return, the minimum return you demand for saving. Okay? And you can see clearly in the financial markets how interest rates are dominated by timing preference and by risk aversion. In every financial market there's something which is called the yield curve. The yield curve is the relationship between the time maturity of an asset and the return of that asset. Okay. So for instance, you have the return here. Okay. And here the time horizon. 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. Which one do you think will have the yield curve according to the time preference principle? some say increasing. Do you think this will be the form? Inverted yield curve. Some more ideas? Another possibility is just flat yield. Well, these are the three basic forms the yield curve can adopt in a market. Okay? We'll study these two tomorrow. This is the flat yield curve and the inverted yield curve. This is non-normal or abnormal yield curves. Okay? We'll see that these yield curves are problematic for different reasons. The normal yield curve, the yield curve that makes sense, is this one. As tomorrow we'll see, this is the yield curve that tends to exist in any market whenever banks are not artificially inflating credit. Okay, but by now I just want you to understand that as we increase the time horizon of an investment, the time horizon during which capital is fixed in an investment, so it's suffering from an opportunity cost because you cannot move that capital to other investments while it is fixed in one of them. The interest rate is increasing. Why? Because the cost of capital depends on time preference. Okay. We could also draw the yield curve by risk profiles of the investment. So instead of having here 1 day, 5 days, etc., you could have very low risk, moderate risk, speculative risk, and you would see also that you would have the same yield curve. I mean, this is a theoretical exercise, of course, but if you go to the markets and you draw the yield curve, take for instance the public debt investment or any corporate bond with different maturities of the same firm, and you will see an increasing yield curve. Okay. So you do have an opportunity cost for the use of capital. Okay, and it's an opportunity cost because of two reasons. Time preference, you value more highly present goods than future goods, and risk aversion, you value more highly secure goods than uncertain goods. Then, if you have a future flow of goods, could you give that future flow of goods a present value? I mean, can you value today what a flow of goods arriving at the future with uncertainty, because the future is not sure, okay, is valued today? You could. Okay? An exercise is very simple. I promise you to pay every year 100 euros for 10 years. How much money are you willing to pay me for that promise? Some quantity. Okay? If I pay 100 euros for 10 years, the total sum will be 1,000 euros. So you will be willing to pay less than 1,000 euros because otherwise it would make no sense. How much less? Well, that depends on your time preference, that depends on how trustworthy I am to you, how risky you feel your position, etc. So we can value future goods at the present. How? By discounting, this is by modifying the value of those future goods according to our time preference and risk aversion. Okay? So this is a very important concept. In fact, I think it's the most important economic concept in relation to investment to understand. When you are investing, you are buying flows of future goods or flows of future income. So you have to value the quality of that flow of income. As the future is not certain, you are buying something uncertain in the future. We are going to see it now. You are buying something uncertain in the future and something which is in the future. So you have to give some value to that flow today. And the value you give to that flow today is critical at the end of the story to see whether you have been better off or worse off. If you overpay for that flow, you will lose money, or you will lose goods at the end. If you pay fairly, let's say, we'll see what's fairly, etc. If you pay fairly, you will be better off, but just plainly, let's say. If you underpay, and underpaying it, other people is not, doesn't have the same expectations as you, so you can take advantage from a market opportunity, you can obtain huge profits, because you will be buying that future flow of goods at a huge discount at the present. Okay? So, investment at the end, we'll see, is just the art of selecting good prices for future flows of income, and to give or to know what price to pay for future goods of income. It's a very difficult task, but it's the task that must be performed. But as I have said, if you overpay for the flow of income, you are losing money. Let's say, I have said you previously, what are you willing to pay me for paying you 100 euros during 10 years? If you pay me 2,000 euros, of course you are losing money, because you will receive 1,000 and you are paying now 2,000. Okay? I said, if you pay it fairly, this is according to your time preference and your risk aversion, you are compensated exactly by the utility you suffer from investing. Okay? Let's say that to you it's the same 100 euros today than 1,000 euros in 10 years. If you pay 900, you are better off, but the extra money you gain, the return you gain, is just a return in order to compensate you for the disutility of postponing your consumption or taking risks. Okay? But imagine you pay 500 for receiving 1,000 euros. Then you have extraordinary returns. You have some gains that are much above your cost of capital. You would be willing to invest just earning a 10%, and you are earning a 100%. So you have extraordinary returns. The point is, those extraordinary returns are sustainable or not? I mean, do you think that one firm can systematically obtain profits or returns, better said, can obtain returns over the capital invested much above its competitors. I mean, the market, the normal market process, which is a company enters in a market, discovers one opportunity which was not being exploited previously by any other company, reorganizes factors of production, this is buys factors of production, produces goods, sells those goods at the market, pays one quantity of money for the factors of production, earns a higher quantity for the sale of goods. The difference are the profits, and those profits, if that company is exploiting a market opportunity not discovered by any other firm before, will be huge profits, okay? But immediately after, what would happen? The rest of the companies would say, okay, this one is gaining a lot of money, I only need to copy what that company is doing in order to obtain those same profits. But what happens when one company copies the business plan of another? Their demand for the factors of production increase. I mean, if you need engineers in order to perform some business plan, if another company is demanding engineers, what happens to the wage of engineers? It goes up. Okay? And at the same time, this competitor is producing the same goods than the previous firm. So what will happen to the price of the goods? More supply, it will fall. So at the end, the profit margin of the sector will be comprising more costs, less prices, less average prices. Okay? So extraordinary profits will tend to fade away, will tend to disappear. They won't be zero. They won't disappear completely. Why? Because, as we have said before, there's a margin, there's a spread which cannot disappear, and this spread, which is the cost of capital. Okay? This is the minimum. If a company is earning less than the cost of capital, he disappears from that sector. He says, I am not willing to stay here in order to gain some money which is lower than the minimum money I require in order to invest it. Okay? So, if a company is able to obtain some extraordinary return systematically, this is not just 1 year waiting for the other companies to copy its business plan, but every single year to obtain a return much higher than the rest of the economy, it must be necessarily because that company has a business plan which cannot be easily copied. Because if not, more companies would go into that sector, and the arbitrage mechanism I have previously described would take effect. So, which are the reasons that can explain why a business plan cannot be immediately copied? Well, the founder of Morningstar, Pat Dorsey, has a very interesting book, which is 5 Rules of Successful Investment. Tomorrow I will give you the exact data, where he classifies 5 reasons why a company can have systematically superior returns over his competitors. I have added a 6th another reason, okay? Because I think that's another possibility. But well, he says, the first is real product differentiation. Tomorrow we will explore these reasons in more depth, okay? Seeing examples, etc. I just want you to remember and to hear about it right now. First is real product differentiation. This is, you have 2 products which are dissimilar and they cannot be immediately copied because maybe you have some technology that the other firm doesn't have. So the other firm cannot copy you. The other one is perceived product differentiation. This is, you have the same product, but the consumer sees the product as different because maybe the brand is different, etc. Okay, the reputation of the firm. Third reason, you are able to drive costs down and competitors cannot copy you. For instance, if there are huge economies of scale, you are attending a huge market, so the others cannot go into that market, so you are a single or almost single player, you have very low costs, and the rest cannot move into that market. Okay. The other possibility is locking in customers. This is increasing the costs of customers to leave your company. Let's think about phone companies, etc., and all the bureaucratic process in order to give up the contract. And the last possibility is locking out competitors, which is more related to government interventionism through patents or through licenses, etc. And I will add a sixth one, which is having a very good entrepreneur at the head of your company, which always goes 2 steps behind the competition. Okay, let's think, for instance, in Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was the legend has told us that he was always thinking ahead of the rest of the market. So once their competitors catch up Apple in a product, he already had some new product to be released, which was completely new product and could be earning extraordinary profits because of that new product, although the margins of the other products were narrower and narrower. Okay. At the end, the competitive advantages you must think as something that leads consumers to pay an extra price for a product. I, as a consumer, why I am willing to pay an extra price for some product versus the lower prices of the competitors? If I am willing to pay an extra price for that product, that the company which is selling that product will earn extra profits over their competitors. Okay. So we have a regular rate of return, which is determined by time preference and risk aversion, and then we can have extraordinary rates of return when some company has a competitive advantage over their competitors. In the very, very, very long run, okay, competitive advantages will fade away. Everyone. Even, I mean, one of the most enduring competitive advantages is Coca-Cola brand. Well, someday Coca-Cola brand will also disappear. Lately, Kodak brand, which 2 decades ago was almost more important than Coca-Cola brand, in the last 2-3 years, the company go bankrupt. So at the end, every competitive advantage will fade away, except the one of government interventionism, which will depend on libertarian people trying to push government interventionism down. But the rest, which depend on the market, will tend to disappear by different mechanisms that we'll have the opportunity to comment tomorrow. But in the very, very long run, you can have 2 or 3 decades with extraordinary profits. So if you are the owner of a company which earns systematically extraordinary profits, you will become a very rich person. It's obvious that people try to design business plans which aim to earn an extraordinary profit. But the problem is not only to design a business plan with expected extraordinary profits. In order to do that, you need to find some competitive advantage that cannot be copied by competitors. But you also need to put capital into that plan in order to implement the plan. If you have a very good idea but you don't have the money to implement the idea, then it will remain as a good idea but not as a many profitable idea. So once the entrepreneur has developed a business plan, he needs the capital to implement that plan. So, and with that capital, he will start buying, hiring factors of production in order to start production. He can raise capital in two ways: through equity and through debt. Debt is just a fixed claim on a future sum of money. So I have the right to earn every month 10 euros. That's a debt or a credit in my case. Then you have other possibility, which is equity. Equity is selling ownership on the project. So you don't have a fixed claim on anything, but you have the total claim on the remaining, on the income in the company after paying all the expenses. So the payments of equity are much more uncertain than the payments of debt, because you are you have the money, you earn the money afterward, after paying the debt holders, and you don't know what money will be remaining for you. Maybe you only have losses, okay? But the potential of its profitability is much higher. The return on debt is capped from the beginning. The return on equity can go to infinity. Okay? So obviously, if the risk of equity is higher than the risk of debt, the cost of capital, the minimum return that savers demand in order to invest in equity will be higher than the minimum return people demands for investing in debt. The interesting part is that sometimes those debt claims or those equity claims can be sold to third people in what is called secondary financial markets. So, even if I have invested directly in a firm in order to develop a business plan, I can sell my right to the future expected flows of income of that firm to a third person. So the advantage of this, which is that I can obtain a huge amount of money from the beginning, even if the firm hasn't started producing anything. Imagine you have developed a business plan which has started last week, but which is very promising. So at the end of every year, it is expected you to earn 1 million euros, okay, for many years. And you say, I want to sell the business. Well, probably, if your expectation is shared by many people, someone will come and will tell you, okay, I buy your business by 10 million euros. So look at that. Even without selling any single part of your production, you are already capitalizing the future income of that company. Of course, you need the expectations of the income to be quite sure, to have savers around you which are willing to buy the business, but in principle you can do that. That's what has happened with Facebook. When Facebook went public, Zuckerberg obtained huge amounts of money, even if Facebook has today tiny profits. Why? Because the expectation is that in the future he will have, or Facebook will gain a lot of money. So people is willing to buy the stakes of the company today, paying the capitalized value of those future amounts of income, of expected income. Maybe they have done a very good investment, maybe they have done a very bad investment. But anyway, when the stocks of Facebook or the stocks in any company are being sold to third persons, those third persons need to evaluate which is the value of that claim for future expected but uncertain amounts of income. So the point or the question is, which is the price at which those financial assets, those stocks and those bonds will tend to be sold? And the answer is the present value of its future expected income. Okay? I don't want to go into the math details, but just to illustrate. I mean, imagine in the year 1 you expect to have 1,000 euros, in year 2 you expect to have 1,000 euros, in year 3 1,100 euros, etc. Okay? So, what price do we give to this expected flow of future income? The price we give today, I mean, the question you have to ask yourself is, how much would I pay in order to have the right to receive this scheduled future flow of income? If we assume that there's only these 3 years, no more income, no, maybe you would pay 2,800, 2,500, well, it depends, okay? But the point is, in the market, there will be, or there will tend to be a price, which is the interest rate, for, as we said before, there's a yield curve in the market, okay, with interest rates for every maturity and every risk profile. So, what you would do is to discount those flows of income at the interest rate of the market, which is the result of all time preference, of marginal time preferences, and marginal risk aversions in the market. So, for instance, imagine that the interest rate in the market is 10%. You would divide this would be the mathematical operation. Okay, it's not important to go into the details. The point is that you would obtain some figure that would allow you to obtain an average 10% return per year. Okay, so if you pay, for instance, 2,500 euros for this flow of income, you would earn, as an average, 10% on your investment, which is enough to compensate the marginal saver in the market according to its marginal time preference and its marginal risk aversion. Okay? So, the tendency is this. If we had all the available information, present and future information, and we could apply a mathematical operation that equalizes all the things in the market, the price would tend to be the result of this mathematical operation. Problems. Information is not given. Information, in fact, is continually changing, and I, as an economic agent, acting in the market, change the available information. Okay? So, as long as information is not given, these cash flows are very uncertain. In any case, they can be more uncertain or less uncertain, but they will be uncertain because the future is not given. So, a case of extreme uncertainty, or, well, I don't know if extreme, but high uncertainty is Facebook. Which will be the future cash flows of Facebook in 20 years' time? Maybe it no longer exists. So, how can I know how much money will earn Facebook in 2 decades? It's almost impossible to know. Okay? I think we don't even are able to know how much money will Facebook obtain in 5 years. But in order to calculate the price, you need to know all future flows of income, not only the 3, 4, or 5 first years, all the life. Okay. Obviously, the flow, for those of you who have some financial mathematics knowledge, the flows in 50 years' time are almost irrelevant for the present price. Okay? But the flows of 10, 15 years are quite relevant, and you would need to know them in order to arrive at a good price. So, the problem persists. Every one of us, as long as it will have some estimation of which future cash flows, which future incomes that company, that business plan will have, will estimate one different present price, fair present price. Okay? So the point is, investors can develop, or investors with good and careful analysis can arrive at some kind of objective price. This is the result of discounting your expected future incomes, and in this sense it's a very subjective calculation because every subject has its own estimation of which will the future outflows will be. But as I said, if we had perfect information, the price would be given. Okay? If we had that the interest rate is this and will continue to be this, or will change, but we know the direction of the change, and we know which the cash flows are willing to be, are going to be, then we have the price, and there cannot be any there cannot be any deviation in that price if we had the information. Recall that this is the same which I tried to say in relation with the imputation of value. Once you have the value of your final end, the utility of the higher goods, of the factors of production, is given, and it's determined by the value of your consumption good. Okay? So, value is subjective, but the utility which is derived into higher order goods is dependent of that first valuation, of that first good order valuation. So here happens the same. You can arrive to some objective estimation of the price of that stream of income. And this is what value investors call intrinsic value. This is the value of this stream of income. The intrinsic valuation, I mean. Which is the intrinsic value of an asset? The discounted value of the future flows of income. So, if you compare that intrinsic value with the market price, you can estimate whether you are overpaying that financial asset or underpaying that financial asset. Imagine that you can buy this flow of income by 1,500 euros. And you say, I think that the intrinsic value is 2,500. Okay? If you have the chance of buying what is currently being valued as 2,500 by 1,500, of course, that's a very good opportunity. Instead, if the price of this stream of income were 3,000, you would say, I'm not willing to buy this because I am overpaying. I am receiving a value, an intrinsic value of 2,500, but I am paying 3,000. Okay? Obviously, here the point is, there will be in the market opportunities to do this. This is to go long into this financial asset or to short this financial asset. That's another kind of operation. There will be opportunities to do this if those prices, those informations are public to everyone. This is, all of us could do that analysis. The same analysis I can do in order to say the intrinsic value of this flow of income is 2,500. But there is people that is willing to sell that stream of income by 1,500. Why is not more people willing to buy that stream of income up to the point where that price goes or is equalized with the intrinsic value of the asset? Because the analysis I do, this is, I have to buy this because it's a good business opportunity, a good investment opportunity, can be done by every one of you. And if every one of you and every one investor in the world does this analysis, what will happen to the market price? It will go up to the intrinsic value. So, is it possible to find systematically in the market good investments like this one? The efficient market hypothesis, which I think was explained to you yesterday, would say no. Because every time there appears an arbitrage opportunity in the market, that arbitrage opportunity in the market is immediately exploded by someone, so it disappears immediately. Okay? But, well, the efficient market hypothesis is wrong because of many reasons. Having access to all the information is not the same as using that information. I mean, if you go to the library, you have lots of information in the library, but you have to read every single book in order to search for and to learn something. Okay, so having access to information is not the same to grasp information. And having grasped the information is not the same as interpreting correctly the information. Okay? Two people can read the same book and extract completely different conclusions. Even books which are logically formalized, mathematically formalized, which should be understood exactly in the same way, well, two people can read the same book and reach diametrically different conclusions. Okay? So having access to information is not the same to grasp the information, and to grasp the information is not the same as interpret correctly the information. So many errors are possible in this way, in this path. Then, having the good interpretation of the information is not the same as taking good choices with that information. People commit lots of errors while taking financial decisions, even if they know what they are doing. I mean, the best value investors in the world make mistakes. Warren Buffett, which is the wealthiest person in the world because of having applied value investing, has committed lots of mistakes. He says it. So, if the most brilliant person in the world, the most experienced person in the world commits mistakes, even having the best available information and the best possible interpretation in the world, don't you think that the rest of the people will commit those same or much more mistakes, even having the same good interpretation of the information? They will. Tomorrow we will see some of these systematic biases and errors in human choice. Some of them are going to the nature of human beings. I mean, value investors say, if you buy a stock which is of which you are pretty sure of your analysis, and the stock falls 80%, you have to buy more of that stock, because you say, imagine, I can buy 2,500 euros by paying 1,500. But imagine that next day this price goes to 500. The logical decision would be, I have to buy more because the business opportunity has increased. But the human character, what will be? Maybe I am wrong. Maybe there's something I haven't considered. Maybe I have to sell in order to minimize my losses. So at the end, it's also a question of character. You have to be strong mentally and intellectually enough to resist huge volatility in prices. And if you are not able to do that, and not every person is willing to do that, because the person, when they go to bed, they want to sleep calmly, they cannot invest in that way. And if they cannot invest in that way, they cannot correct the errors that appear in the market. And finally, there are errors which are general errors, which is something called business cycle. Okay? So even when all the information is available to everyone and everyone interprets that information in the same way, they can be wrong. And if you have a good theory about business cycle, you can take advantage of that. So, how should we act in order to minimize the risks of being wrong? Because at the end, the question is that. I mean, if I have to buy future streams of income, future flows of income, and I have to buy them now by a price, I want to hedge against the possibility of being wrong when I estimate what those future flows of income will be. And the answer that the value investing philosophy gives is you have to buy intrinsic value at a huge discount. For instance, if you think that something has an intrinsic value of 100, you have to buy it by 30. Which is the advantage of this bargain purchase? The advantage is twice. First, you maximize your potential return, because if you buy something by 30 while it's valued 100, you multiply by 3. If you pay 90, you only have a 10% return. So you maximize your return by buying at a huge discount. But you also minimize your risk, because imagine that what you expected to be valued 100, in reality it has a fair price, because you don't estimate correctly the future incomes. It has a price, an intrinsic value of 60. You have committed a huge error, because from 100 to 60 it's a 40% discount. But even though you will be multiplying by 2 your investment, because you have buy at 30. Instead, if you had bought that asset at 90, you would be already losing money. And if at the end that asset is not valued 60 but 25, by buying it at 30 you will lose money, but well, you will lose 10-50%, which is quite enough, but it's not a disaster. But if you had bought that asset at 90 and the value is 25, you had a disaster of investment. Okay? So you have to buy intrinsic value at a huge discount. And this difference between the price you pay for an intrinsic value you estimate is what in value investing is known as margin of safety. And according to Warren Buffett, margin of safety are the 3 most important words in the world of investment. So remember them because they are essential. And finally, in order to give some kind of definition of value investing, in order to follow the lesson tomorrow, value investing consists in buying excellent businesses at bargain prices by correcting market inefficiencies and errors. So you are like an arbitrage. You are making arbitrage, okay? You are making arbitrage between your intrinsic value, your estimated intrinsic value, and the market price of that asset. So you correct market inefficiencies while buying excellent businesses at bargain prices. What is an excellent business? One which has the ability to earn extraordinary profits in a sustainable way. What is bargain prices? Paying a market price which is at a huge discount in relation to intrinsic price, intrinsic value. Okay. So tomorrow we will study how to identify excellent businesses, how give some obviously simple calculations of its intrinsic value, and how compare that intrinsic value with market price in order to see if it is at a good discount or not. And in the final lesson we will see some of those systematic errors, the business cycle, how does it affect market valuations, and creates also business opportunities to purchase and to invest in those assets. So we finish here and we open the question.